Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I wanted to do the 7 decks for Deadly Sins, which is a VR to Sylvain's Deadly Sins. Now, I first saw this tag, I can't even remember whose channel I actually saw it on first because this tag is so much fun. I have watched so many of these VRs. So I, of course, eventually got around to watching actual original tag video. And it also gave me the opportunity to check out his channel and his other videos, which is always wonderful. I love finding new channels to explore. And so I wanted to jump in on this tag. So let's go ahead and take a look at my 7 decks for Deadly Sins. So the first category is pride. Now, Sylvain did mention in the video, the original video, that you could kind of take your own interpretation on all of these prompts. And this one is kind of, I think, the one that I've really only taken the biggest liberties with, which I saw a lot of people do as well. The original prompt was like a deck that you bought for flexing. I find that term really skeezy. So what I'm doing is I am doing a deck that it is an out of print and fairly expensive deck, but it's also one of my favorites and I love working with it. This is the Animals Divine Tarot. Again, I apologize because it's out of print, but I love this deck. I love that it has the animals for the Minor Arcana. We have the gods and goddesses for the Major Arcana, and it's just like this beautiful blend of like that whole idea of as above, so below, kind of blending the divine and the mundane. I don't know why the Empress is upside down, but this is one of my absolute favorite decks. And so it's definitely a pride and joy in my collection. I am so glad that I was able to find a copy of it. I actually got lucky and I found a brand new copy for a very decent price. So I really just lucked out there. There's also that other tag, you know, if you could only have 10 decks, like this would be in there for me. This would definitely be one of the decks that I'd want to like make sure that I hold on to forever and ever because I absolutely love it. So deck number 2 is your greed deck. And I saw a couple of different interpretations for this, which was kind of fun. The original one was a deck that you use just for reading for you. Truth be told, that is every deck in my collection because I don't read professionally and I don't read for other people. So every deck in my collection is only used for me. But if we're talking about a deck in my collection that like I would not let anybody else touch, that would be my Llewellyn tarot. This is my trimmed one. This could also fall into the Gluttony category because I have multiple copies of this deck, but I'm going to show you another deck for that category. I love this deck. I know y'all are probably sick of seeing this deck on my channel because it's like, it's my favorite, right? It's another one of those, if I could only have 10, this would be up there. Maybe I should do that tag. Anyway, I love this deck. It's such a fantastic reader for me. I have such a personal relationship with this deck and a personal connection to it. This is, of course, my little trimmed copy just down to the artwork. I do have a copy that I've trimmed with just the titles on it. I have a copy that is trimmed with the top and bottom titles on it. I have a copy that is full with the full borders on it as well. So yeah, I have like 4 copies of this deck. Could totally be in my Gluttony category. But when it came to like the one deck that I would be like, no, you can't touch it, it's mine. That's this deck. And so I had to put it in for this category. So I did pick another deck for the Gluttony category, but I love this deck. It's definitely mine. Like it feels like my deck. This is my greed deck, my trimmed specific 10th edition of the Llewellyn. So the next prompt is Wrath, and this is the deck that you are mad at. Truth be told, there's a couple of decks I could have picked for this particular category because I have a couple of decks that I'm like, we're not getting along right now. But the deck that I have been the most wrathful with or angry with for the longest amount of time is, you'll never believe it, the Pagan Otherworlds. Okay, here's the thing with this deck. It is so slippery that I cannot keep this deck in my hands. So every time I try to work with this deck, it flies everywhere. It refuses to stay in my hand. So I feel like as much as I love this artwork and I think it's so cool and I love working with it in terms of the artwork, physically speaking, this deck hates me. We don't get along. I can't keep a hold of it. It won't stay in my hands. It won't stay on my table. It's constantly trying to get away from me. So at least that's what it feels like. So I feel like the whole wrath thing, I feel like it's mutual with this deck. And the images are so cool. Maybe it's mad at me because I threatened to trim it. I don't know. Is that like a thing? I don't feel like it is, but maybe it is. I've talked about trimming this deck many, many times because, and beside the fact that it's so slippery, like the cardstock is super slippery. And I know like everybody loves this cardstock. I hate it. I hate it because I can't keep it in my hands. But also it is larger than a traditional tarot size, and I have really small hands, so I have a really hard time shuffling this deck, getting my hands around it. So I have thought about trimming it. I have, because I'm stubborn, I have worked with it a lot, but it is such a chore for me to riffle shuffle, and decks I can't riffle shuffle don't tend to stay in my collection for very long. So like that hurts my hands. So I've thought about trimming it, and I might yet, or it may find a new home, or I don't know, because it's beautiful, right? It's so beautiful. I love this deck. I love the artwork. I love that it is that kind of pippy, but it's also a little bit Waite Smith, and we don't have a ton of people, particularly in the minors, which I absolutely love. It's just beautiful. But it refuses to play nice when I try to work with it. So I'm mad at it. I feel like it's mad at me. And I've had this deck for years. And every time I get it out, I have this struggle with it. So I'm kind of like, I don't really want to get it out because I don't want to fight with you today. So that's kind of my honest feelings about this deck. It is stunning. Absolutely stunning. I freaking hate the cardstock. It's too big, and I feel like it doesn't like me. So that's that. I do love it. I do love it, but I have such a hard time working with it that like I don't work with it very often because it just makes me angry every time I do. So that is definitely my Wrath deck and has been for many years, but it's still here, so we'll see. So the next prompt is Envy. So this is the deck that you wanted because other people had it. Again, there are several decks in my collection that I could have included in this category, but I think the deck that I was envious of and wanted for the longest time that it took me forever to get a hold of is the Tyldwick. Now, this is actually the first edition, so I was lucky enough to get a copy of the first edition, one of the few decks that I actually like the shiny gilding on. I kind of like lusted after. I guess this could have been in lust, but I really, really wanted this deck like for a really long time. Sorry, it's upside down. And it was out of print for a while, as most of you probably know. And then a few copies kind of came to light, and I was able to snag one of those like right before it went out of print, like right before the creator passed. And so I was just lucky enough to snag it from a shop, and I absolutely love it. But it was one of those decks that like I saw everybody using and working with, and I so wanted it for like a long time before I was able to get my hands on it. I couldn't even find like a secondhand copy or somebody selling theirs. Like I tried all kinds of different avenues to get my hands on a copy of this deck, and it just didn't happen for the longest time. And then, like I said, I happened to find it at a little shop and snagged a copy of it right before the creator passed. There was a second edition that came out that his brother had released for him. I was tempted to get it just to have it, but I decided this one is really special to me, and so it's definitely the one that I just feel like if I had a second one, I would never use it because this one has like a special feel to me. I have a personal connection to this deck in particular. And so I wouldn't really want to replace it. So anyway, this is definitely my envy deck because I was sort of envious of anybody who had it for a very long time, and it took me a long time to get a copy of it. I'm so glad I did. It was so worth it. My apologies to anybody who's now in that struggle trying to get a hold of this deck because it is really beautiful and is really something special. I actually don't work with it as like a traditional tarot a lot of the time. I use it a lot for meditation and path working, which just works beautifully. So the next prompt is lust, and I saw a couple of different versions of this, which was really cool. So the prompt in the original video in the description said, a deck you like for aesthetics. So I picked the Tabula Mundi because I love this deck. I think it is so cool. I haven't worked with it yet because I'm kind of like doing this whole like Thoth thing and like all of that. But this deck is so cool. I just think it is aesthetically just really, really stunning. I have a lot of really aesthetically beautiful decks in my collection, but this one, I don't know, it's just like, it's aesthetically pleasing and it's beautiful, but it's also like super cool, right? I thought about pulling out like the Victorian Romantic because aesthetically, like I have the one with the gold stamping on it and all of that. I mean, aesthetically, that deck is stunning. But this deck is not only stunning, but it is just freaking cool. And so I thought this was a great one for the lust category. It's also, a bit thothy, as we see here with the lust card. How perfect is that? And I just think that there's so much going on in this deck. There's like so much depth to it. No, that wasn't really the prompt because the prompt was aesthetically beautiful. And like I said, I have lots of aesthetically beautiful decks, but this one is aesthetically beautiful in such a cool way that was kind of the criteria I went for with this particular prompt. So yeah, I'm looking forward to actually working with this deck hopefully soon. It's one that I just really look through, and I think that's another reason why it kind of drew me into aesthetically, because I haven't actually worked with this deck yet. I just pick it up and I just look through it. So it's one of those that I just enjoy checking out the artwork, and so that's like totally an aesthetic thing because I'm not reading with it, I'm not actually using it. I'm just enjoying the artwork. I'm just looking through it. And while I do intend to use it, it just hasn't happened yet because, again, still studying the Thoth. So anyway, that is definitely, I think, a super cool deck and aesthetically beautiful. The backs are super cool too. There's like, well, it's going to catch my lights weird, but there's like holographic stuff on the back. And yeah, just a really cool deck and very aesthetically beautiful. So the next prompt is Gluttony. And this is a deck that you bought and you didn't actually need. And while I could have included like my multiple copies of the Llewellyn Tarot, I could also have mentioned, or I will mention, pre-ordering the new edition of the Victorian Romantic Tarot, even though I have the previous edition. That's kind of a gluttony thing. But what I chose was the Jaus Tarot. And this is, I can't even remember what edition this is. I want to say it's the second, but here's the thing with this deck. I freaking love it. However, I paid out of print prices for this like several years ago. And I didn't need it. I certainly didn't need it for what I paid for it. But I love this deck. It's super cool. It's definitely one of those that's like up there in my top decks. It reads so well for me. It's kind of got like a Marseille energy to it, which I really love, but I definitely didn't need it. It has my all-time favorite emperor. I love that he came up. It's like my favorite emperor of any deck I've ever had. And yeah, I didn't need it. And I paid a pretty penny for it, which I didn't need to do, especially because like a year or so later, like it came out again. And I almost bought another copy of it. But again, similar to like the Tyldwick, like I love this copy and I don't really feel like I need a backup. And I feel like if I got a different copy, it just wouldn't feel quite the same to me, right? This copy has a certain feel to me. It has a certain energy. It's so cool and I love it. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I have it. I mean, there's a little part of me that wishes I'd have waited, but it does have different backs. So this one has the yellow flower backs, which I think is really cool. So yeah, anyway, that is my Gluttony deck because I didn't need it. I paid out of print prices for it. The most expensive deck I've ever bought in my collection. I went through because I'm a nerd and I have a spreadsheet and I can tell you exactly what I paid for every single deck I own. But this deck is, and I don't know why I keep it in its box. It's like one of the few decks that I keep it in the box and then in a bag, but I do. Anyway, this is the most expensive deck I've ever bought in my entire collection. The most I've ever paid for a deck. So definitely a Gluttony deck there. And that's the Jaus Tarot. So finally, we have our Sloth category, which is the deck that you reach for when you are like just being lazy and you just want an easy reader. And for me, it is the Tarot of Light, which is in this absolutely gorgeous Peggy bag that Peggy made for me for it. I love this. This is the new edition. It's been renamed as Tarot of Light, and it is has a little bit different backs. It's on matte cardstock. I think this is a Blue Angel deck. It previously was called the Art of Love, and I gifted my first edition, my Art of Love edition, to a friend, and picked this one up because I love that it's matte cardstock. I think I'm still going to trim it again, same as I did the first edition. I basically took off the two sides or the three sides and just left the titles at the bottom because it's kind of a little bit a larger deck and it's harder for me to work with. But here's the thing with this deck. I actually really like the keywords on the bottom, and this is one of those decks that because of the keywords, I think, I pull this deck out whenever I just want like a real quick and easy reading and I don't want to work at it, because I can just throw down a couple cards and it'll like make a sentence, right? So let's shuffle it and just do that real quick because we're here and we're playing, and you see it's kind of big. So I need to trim it because I have a hard time getting my hands around it, but let's just throw down 3 cards so you can see what I mean. Okay, so we have Ecstasy with the Lovers, we have Guidance with the Teacher, and we have Sixth Sense with the Queen of Hearts. So I can look at that and that's like makes a little sentence right there that gives me a little reading, and like I don't have to work at it. I do quite like most of the artwork in this deck and the imagery. And for the most part, I do think the keywords work fairly well with the tarot associations, but I kind of use it a little bit like an oracle, where I actually most of the time pay more attention to the keywords, but I still read with it like it's a tarot, if that makes sense. But anyway, this is my deck that I use when, yeah, I'm just being lazy and I just want to throw down some cards and get a real quick and easy read because it has those keywords on it. And I do that quite often, like especially like at the end of the day where I'm like tired and my brain isn't really working very well anymore, but I kind of want to do a reading and I kind of just want to like wrap up the day with like a nice message or something to kind of help me kind of transition from like work day to home day or home life. This deck is fantastic for that, but it's definitely like a Sloth deck because it's one I go to when I just like want an easy read and I don't want to work at it and I just want it to basically hand it to me on a silver platter, and that is what this deck does. So there you go. Those are my 7 decks for 7 Deadly Sins. So if you haven't yet checked out Sylvain's original video, I'm going to leave that linked in the description box below for you. Definitely go check it out. It's fantastic. And of course, check out all the VRs because they are wonderful. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon in another video.